Good morning and welcome to the Daily Cyber Briefing for Tuesday, the 12th of November. I'm Stephen Ridgway. Google has announced that it is going to mandate cloud MFA in 2025. It is basically what they're talking about is making MFA a required login feature for Google Cloud users. They are looking to phase this out, phase one starting this month, and phase two beginning in early 2025 will result in all Google Cloud users being required to configure and enable multi-factor authentication to access accounts. I think it's been quite a long time coming, but is not a bad thing. I do remember not that long ago when MFA was considered to be too complicated for normal users. And I know of at least one organisation, a highly unionised organisation, where despite suffering from some very significant account-based breaches, the unions refused to allow MFA because the company wasn't going to provide devices to literally tens of thousands of users in order to enable MFA. Yeah, interesting. Never mind. I think these days it will be difficult to say MFA is not a piece of basic cyber hygiene, and if you're not doing your basic cyber hygiene, then you have missed out on the opportunity to deal with the vast majority of real-world attacks. So watch out for this. If you are Google users using Google Cloud, got accounts in Google Cloud, then be aware that this is going on, because there may well be some Google mandated changes to how these accounts work coming your way if you haven't already implemented MFA. I mean, we said before, MFA is not the panacea to all authentication and identity ills. However, it is a significant. However, it is a significant step in the right direction, and works very well against the sort of untargeted password spraying type attacks. At least if you are attempting to compromise an account which is protected by MFA, you have to do more than simply just throw usernames and passwords around and see where they stick. You have to, in some way or another, be looking to intercept the MFA codes, which is generally something more targeted, although not necessarily. I could imagine scenarios where you could automate that process. But the other alternative would be to try and hijack sessions post login. Again, requires more thought and more effort on the part of the attacker. Okay, so there's an article in the Register that I came across this morning, which is very interesting. The FBI has issued a warning as crooks ramp up emergency data request scams. Now, this is an interesting one. Okay, so I'm not so concerned about the fact that this is based around the information in the article is based in the US, because I'm sure that the same scam would work pretty much anywhere. But basically, law enforcement agencies have got the rights in most countries. They have the rights to request data as part of ongoing investigations, obviously. which I think is perfectly legitimate in, crime fighting and fighting terrorism and all the rest of it requires at times law enforcement to gather information from third parties, be those private organisations, other government organisations, whatever it might be. What struck me is if you are hit with one of these requests, how many of us would actually know whether it's legitimate or not? Beyond the very basic, does this appear to be coming from a legitimate email, that sort of thing? Would many of us really know how to check that request was legitimate? I think actually the truth is I don't think I would know. I would have to go and research how to confirm that the request is legitimate or not. I wonder whether I think this would be quite a successful vector for attack if you knew the data that you were trying to get hold of about certain people in order to extortion, targeted phishing, all sorts of things, the usual sort of stuff. So yeah, it just struck me. So I think it's worth having a read of it, only because it's a method of gathering data and information, including significant amounts of PII. It's a method that I personally hadn't thought of, but now it is known to be used, certainly in the US. Would expect that to then trigger a whole load of copycat type events in other countries, potentially including the UK or wherever else you may be. So yeah, definitely worth having a little think about this, and definitely worth making sure that people with access to data, senior executives, finance departments, HR, the usual bunch, and make sure that they are aware of this and to be skeptical of requests. Because the thing about this is, because it's part of an investigation, it is not unimaginable that there would be already a sense of urgency. You know how phishing emails try to generate a sense of urgency. Often, at its simplest, stuff like your invoice is late being paid. Look at this immediately and make payment straight away to avoid court actions or whatever it might be. Those sorts of things. It's common that there's a call to action and a sense of urgency being generated within these phishing emails. Well, interesting that this would naturally, you would expect there to be urgency and a call to action in this. So yeah, definitely one to think about, and I would suspect that really the only thing you can do to protect against this stuff is to train your staff to be skeptical but helpful but skeptical. To check, find methods of checking rather than just providing the information. By the way, the requests for data have been seen to come from compromised but otherwise legitimate accounts. So you can't use the usual, is it an actual FBI email address kind of thing? Has this really come from GCHQ, whatever it might be. So yeah, that will help but won't solve this particular problem. And then finally from me today, an interesting feature which I've only recently become aware of on iPhones. iOS 18.1 introduced all sorts of things, and people got very swept away with the whole artificial intelligence stuff that's been introduced. At least allegedly. I don't actually recall seeing any artificial intelligence sort of actively doing anything on my iPhone. Although I've got an iPhone, yeah, big deal. So, however, one of the other features in the background appears to be an inactivity reboot feature, which I think is really cool. So basically, iOS has a concept of before first login and after first login. Or, sorry, before first unlog and after first unlog. Things like methods of authentication. I've noticed that like Face ID won't enable after reboot until you've logged in using your passcode or whatever the first time. So there are all sorts of features of the operating system that are just not available if it is in before first unlog state. So apparently, allegedly, if you have a iOS device which is sitting locked but otherwise logged in the after first unlog state, if it sits in that state for 4 days, it reboots and resets itself to before first unlock. This has come to light because certain law enforcement agencies have been caught out by this, where devices have been stored for later forensic analysis. They've discovered that the devices are rebooted themselves. That's regardless. It doesn't require network access or Wi-Fi access or whatever in order to be prompted to reboot. Because we've seen that, you can get the reboot this device sort of thing that you can force. Well, that relies on the device having connectivity to iCloud in order to pick up the command to reboot. It's very common these days for thieves and law enforcement to store an iPhone in a Faraday cage to prevent that. Well, this is just time-based. So if it's on and it's not logged in for 4 days, and you've not accessed it for 4 days, it will reboot. I think it's very interesting. I kind of have the opinion that law enforcement just need to suck it up. In this sense, they've got an enormous amount of resources and tooling that they can use. The fact that they've been caught out by this, I think, is more just, but quite frankly, I think it's just lazy on their side. I think where it is particularly useful, though, is where somebody has stolen your phone, but hasn't managed to access it yet. That will make it an awful lot harder to access your data. So, kind of cool. I can't at the moment find anywhere where you can control this behaviour, but I'm sure there will be information forthcoming about that. Allegedly, you can adjust the timer, but I haven't found out where yet. Undoubtedly, need to do more digging. So, according to some posts on X, you can configure it between 10 minutes and a certain number of hours, or you can even disable this particular feature. I shall dig further on this one, but it is quite interesting. Anyway, that's all from me for today. Hope you have a good Tuesday, and I'll speak to you